Let's talk about Headless CMS. Because if you've spent any time researching website platforms, CMS tools, or scalability, you've probably seen the term Headless CMS come up. It's usually positioned as the future or the correct way to build websites. But the truth is that most people don't actually understand what a Headless CMS is, and to be honest, even fewer people genuinely have the need for one. So in this video, I'm going to explain what a Headless CMS actually is in very simple terms, who it's actually for and who it's not for, and why for the vast majority of real-world projects, a traditional CMS setup still makes the most sense, including how that would look in something like Wix Studio. So no buzzwords, no hype, just clarity. Before we talk about Headless, let's very quickly cover what a CMS actually is. Now, CMS stands for Content Management System, and at its core, it's just a tool that lets you store content, edit content, and then display that content. So that might be blog posts, pages, products, images, listings, or locations. So let's take a look at how a CMS can be used on a functional website. So I'm here in Wix Studio, and I've gone ahead and opened up one of their free templates. Just as a quick note, if you like to build fast or, perhaps you're lost on how to get started, templates are a great way to kickstart your project. So if you wanted to open up a free template and bring your content in, that's absolutely a logical way to start your site if you're completely new, or if the idea of designing from scratch slightly overwhelms you, this is a great place to start. So this is a creative portfolio for an artist, and it uses a CMS to display the projects. So you can see here as I scroll down, all of these projects will be coming from a CMS. Quite often on websites, you'll find repeated content like this, for example, with a blog. And normally you can conclude that if it's repeated in this exact same way, where you've got repeated images, text, and sections, that it's probably coming from a CMS. I can click through into an individual project, and you can see all of this data is being displayed nicely on the screen, and all of this will be being pulled from effectively a table. So let's click Edit Site and take a look. If we navigate across to the left-hand side and come down to CMS and then view our collections, you can see we've got a collection here called Work with 6 items. If we view that, we should get a table view, which makes it much simpler to see the raw data. So here you can see the exact same 6 projects that we just saw presented in a much more attractive format on the homepage, but boiled down to its raw data. This makes it really easy for us to go in, change images, change information, and update anything according to what we need to do. So this is very much how a traditional CMS would work. Traditionally, a CMS does 2 things at the same time. It stores your content and then controls how that content appears on your website. So you edit something, you hit publish, and it shows up on the page. And now that's how most people have worked for years. And honestly, for most projects, this still works extremely well. A headless CMS changes that setup by removing the second part entirely. So there's no built-in website, there's no page templates, there's no layout system. It's just the content store, and that's where the term headless actually comes from. The body is the content, but the head, the website, is removed. So instead of rendering pages itself, a headless CMS stores your content and then exposes it through an API. Other platforms can then request that content and decide how to display it. That might be a website, a mobile app, a dashboard, or even multiple platforms at the same time. The CMS doesn't care where the content goes. It just hands it over when it's asked. The simplest way to think of this is to picture a traditional CMS as a restaurant that cooks the food, plates it, and serves it to the customers. A headless CMS is just the kitchen. So it prepares the ingredients and hands them out through a door. You decide how and where they're served. So why does a headless CMS exist at all? Well, it exists to solve one specific problem: managing your content once and using it everywhere. And this becomes important when your website isn't the only place that your content needs to live. For example, if a company has a website, a mobile app, internal tools, and maybe digital displays, they want to manage the same content in 5 different systems. A headless CMS allows all of those platforms to pull from one central content source. A real-world example would be a large retailer. They might have a website, a mobile shopping app, in-store screens, and maybe even integrations with voice assistants. Products, prices, descriptions, and images, they all live in one headless CMS, and every platform via an API pulls from it. Now that's a genuine use case for headless CMS, and in that situation, it makes a lot of sense. Now, where headless CMS starts to feel confusing is for designers and builders who are used to visual tools. There aren't pages, there's no layouts, there's no immediate visual feedback. You're working with raw data, fields, and relationships. If you're used to editing something and instantly seeing that reflected on its page, Headless can feel abstract and disconnected. That's not because you're doing anything wrong, it's just the nature of the tool. What often gets skipped in Headless CMS discussions is the trade-off. Headless gives you more flexibility and more control, but it also gives you more responsibility. You now need a separate front end, hosting, authentication, permissions, monetization, and integrations. Headless isn't a simpler sort of situation. It's more modular and only worth it when you actually need that flexibility. So who is Headless CMS actually for? It makes sense if you're building a multi-platform product, if you have large content teams, if you expect serious scale, or if you need total control over how that content is rendered and handled. Now, if that's you, then Headless is exactly the right choice. But Headless CMS is usually overkill if you're building a marketing website, portfolios, content sites, brochure sites, landing pages, small to medium SaaS products. In those cases, the added complexity rarely pays back for itself. This is where the traditional CMS platforms still make a lot of sense. In a traditional setup, your CMS, your website builder, and your business tools, they all live in one place. You edit the content, you see it immediately, you click publish, and say, for example, in Wix Studio, the CMS lives inside the same environment as the site builder. So content and presentation are interconnected, which means faster iteration, fewer moving parts, and far less maintenance. This doesn't mean that traditional CMS platforms are old or inferior. It simply means they prioritize momentum, clarity, and simplicity. For a vast majority of real-world projects, that's not a limitation, it's an advantage. Now, a simple way to decide which route makes sense is to ask yourself 3 questions. Does my content need to live in multiple platforms? Do I need full control over how that content is rendered? And am I happy managing a more complex setup in the long run? And if the answer to those questions is no, a traditional CMS will almost definitely be the smarter choice. Headless CMS isn't the future of everything. It's a specialist tool for specific problems. And for most people building real websites, an integrated CMS setup is not only simpler, but it's much, much better. If this helped, let me know what you're building in the comments and I'll tell you whether Headless actually makes sense for your project, and I'll see you in the next video.